I'd like to call this December 2nd, 2010 Cookeville City Council meeting to order. Could we get a roll call, please?
Councilman Anderson.
Present.
Councilman Woodford.
Present.
Mayor Swallows.
Here.
Vice Mayor Epps. Councilman Albright.
Here.
4 present, 1 absent.
Thank you. Would everyone please stand for a moment of silence followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Shipley, any changes to the agenda?
No changes.
All right, seeing none, can I get a approval in a second?
I move for approval. Second.
All right, call for the vote.
4 yes votes, motion carries.
Thank you. On to old business. Consider approval of minutes of council meeting held on November 18th, 2010. Motion for approval in a second.
So moved.
Second.
Call for the vote.
4 present, 1 absent. Yes. 4 yes. 4 yes votes, motion carries.
Thank you.
Lucky to be here.
That's all that matters.
Okay, on to the consent agenda. We have, looks like 5 things on our consent agenda. Item number 3, set a date January the 6th, 2011 for a public hearing on ordinance 101215, closure and abandonment of an undeveloped alley right-of-way located between Byrne and Lee Avenues through parcel 7 on map 40G, Group C, and declaring it as surplus. Item 4, set a date January the 6th, 2011 for a public hearing on ordinance 101216, rezoning 600 Cora Road from MS Medical Services to RD, single family and duplex residential. Item number 5, set a date January the 6th, 2011 for a public hearing on ordinance 101217, amendment to zoning code section 230, floodplain district to reflect revisions to the flood insurance rate map resulting from a letter of map revision. Item number 6, set a date January the 6th, 2011 for a public hearing on ordinance 101218, amendment to the zoning code relating to package store locations. And then item number 7, consider awarding bid for uniforms from the electric department. To have a motion for approval on the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion from the council? Seeing none?
4 yes votes, motion carries.
Thank you. On to the new business. Item number 8, hold a public hearing and consider on first reading ordinance 101113, closure and abandonment of a portion of an undeveloped alley right-of-way located north of Craighead Street and contiguous with parcels 14 and 15 on tax map 53B, Group G, and declaring it as surplus. Sponsor, Mr. James Mills.
Mayor and council members, the location of this alley right-of-way is depicted upon the screen. This item was initiated by property owner Burton Nelson. So you can see this is located north of the undeveloped right-of-way of Craighead Drive and just south of 4th Street. According to a survey, the right-of-way of the undeveloped alley is approximately 10 feet in width and is approximately 570 feet in total length. The portion of the right-of-way requested for closure is approximately 360 feet in length north from the undeveloped right-of-way of Craighead Drive. 2 properties, parcels 14 and 15 on tax map 53B, Group G, both owned by Mr. Nelson, are contiguous with the portion of the alley right-of-way proposed for closure and abandonment. There are 3 additional properties on the northern section of the right-of-way that will remain open. These 3 property owners have been contacted and are not opposed to the partial closure and abandonment of the alley right-of-way. The procedure for closure and abandonment of streets and right-of-ways is specified in the municipal code, and those procedures have been followed in this case. The applicable departments have reviewed the closure and abandonment request, and there are no utilities located within the right-of-way. The Planning Commission recommended for approval of the closure and abandonment and the declaration of surplus property with sale to the adjoining property owners in compliance with the municipal code, and the Planning Department concurs with this recommendation.
All right, thank you, Mr. Mills. Do I have a motion and a second for approval?
So moved.
A second.
Second, okay. Any discussion from the council? Any questions? Any from the audience? Seeing none? Yes,
I'm
ma'am.
sorry, can we go back to the picture?
Yes, ma'am. The aerial photograph.
Yes, that's what I meant. Okay. So it's never,
There's no indication of an alley ever having been there.
having ever been there, okay. Thank you.
Well,
All right, any more questions? All right, seeing none, call for the vote.
4 yes votes, motion carries.
Thank you. On to item number 9. Hold a public hearing and consider on first reading ordinance 101114, adopting the Cookeville 2030 plan, sponsor Mr. James Mills.
Mayor and council members, the Planning Commission has prepared and approved a plan for the future growth and development of the city and its urban growth boundary, and is required by state statutes as certified to the City Council the Cookeville 2030 plan. The Cookeville 2030 plan is intended to replace the 1999 Cookeville Comprehensive Future Land Use Plan. The 1999 plan was the first plan for the city in nearly 40 years. The 2030 plan serves as a general guide for the physical development of the city. It's long range, it covers a period of 20 years, and it's comprehensive in that it covers the city and the entire urban growth boundary, and it encompasses all the functions that make the city work. And also, perhaps most importantly, it serves as a statement of policy covering the location, type, quantity, and rate of growth. It has 3 primary functions. It serves as a vision for the future growth and development of the city. It serves as a guide for decision making, and a good example of that is we use the plan as a guide for rezoning issues. And finally, it's required by state law. It's a primary function of a planning commission to prepare a plan for the municipality. The Cookeville 2030 plan involved more than 2 years of work by the Planning Commission and Planning Department. Numerous public hearings, more than a dozen, and public work sessions were held to solicit public opinions on the future of the city. Additionally, a random survey of city residents was completed to obtain public input. A great deal of field work was completed to prepare the plan. For example, every parcel in the city was checked to see how it was used. All the streets were analyzed to determine their conditions, as were sidewalks and many other things. The plan is broken down into 7 primary elements. They're depicted upon the screen that lead to a development plan. I'll briefly touch on each of the elements. Background for planning element basically deals with the historical development of the city, how did we get to where we are now, and how we currently function in terms of government operations. The next section of the plan is environmental and natural factors. Many of these factors affect the future development of the city. Some of the factors that were analyzed included climate, air quality, water resources, stormwater, trees and vegetation, topography, sinkholes, drainage, flooding, soils, wetlands, and geology. One of the key findings is not all the land is suitable for development, and some land should be protected from development. The next segment of the plan is the socioeconomic factors affecting development. This includes population and economic characteristics. Perhaps the most important finding in this section of the plan are population projections. You must have population projections to be able to project future land use needs. Based on projections from UTCBR, the city is projected to have a population of almost 40,000 people by the year 2030, or the threshold of the 2030 plan. A key component of the 2030 plan is existing land use analysis. We've got to know what we've got have now to be able to project in the future. As I said earlier, each parcel in the city was analyzed to determine how it's used. Of the 20,850 acres within the city, based on our inventory in 2008, an estimated 57% was classified as developed. The remaining 43% was classified as undeveloped. We identified 13,003 housing units, which is an increase of approximately 3,000 units since 1999. Of these 13,000 housing units, approximately 56% were traditional single-family homes, 37% were multifamily units, and 4% was mobile homes, and 3% were public housing units. We also looked at As I talked about annexation, we've grown by nearly 6,800 acres since 1999. We also looked at construction history. One of the key findings in this, especially from 2000 to 2008, multifamily units have exceeded the construction of single-family units by over 200 units. To determine how much land is available for future development, vacant land had to be analyzed. We have approximately 9,024 acres classified as vacant. We analyzed that land on based what percentage of that could actually be utilized. Approximately 30% of it is encumbered by physical constraints limiting development potential. Those constraints are depicted visually on the map. And here's an actual summary of those constraints. Of the remaining 6,400 acres, it's estimated that 75% of this does not have access to public sewer. So we have about 1,600 acres of land, vacant land in the city, with access to sewer having no significant constraints to development. We also looked at the impact of zoning, with nearly 63% of the area within the city zoned for single-family residential use, and 52% of that is zoned for very low-density residential development, RS20. Another key component of the plan is the transportation analysis, and this also includes future plans for transportation improvements. The transportation system forms the framework upon which the community is built. We analyze many different aspects of transportation, including recent events affecting the system, classification of thoroughfares, traffic circulation patterns, traffic volumes, traffic capacity, level of service, frequency of accidents, traffic impediments, traffic generators, intersection deficiencies, existing street conditions, parking, transit, and pedestrian and non-vehicular circulation. Two key components to come out of this section of the plan were a major street plan and a pedestrian and circulation plan. Perhaps the most important part of the plan, and what all these other segments lead up to, is the development plan itself. The development plan is the actual plan for the future development of the city. It consists of three primary components. The first is a set of major assumptions, factors, issues, and trends that frame the formulation of the plan. For example, one assumption is made that we will recover from this current economic downturn. We've made that assumption. There are several general assumptions placed in the plan. The second component is the development of goals and objectives and the policies to achieve these goals and objectives. And then the third component, which is based on our projected land use needs, is the development of a future land use map. This map visually presents our goals and objectives. The last section of the plan is plan implementation. The plan is basically useless unless we implement it, and this section includes a list of tools that we can use to implement the plan. The Planning Commission has adopted the 2030 plan and is recommended for its adoption by the City Council. The Planning Department concurs with this recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Mills. Can I get a motion and a second for approval?
So moved.
Second.
Any questions from the council?
I've got a few comments I'd like to make. I've been contacted by several different people concerned about a few of the roads and this plan, the 2030 plan. I've spent a considerable amount of time this week researching it, looking at their point of view, looking at ours as the city, the planning, and I've written some notes, and I'd just like to explain how I'm going to vote on this and why. Basically, who contacted me was the Cookeville Area Residents Association, and there is a history with this organization that goes back nearly 10 years. And I must be frank with you that I did not pay much attention to their situation because I followed it in the stories that were written in the paper, the newspaper, because it did not concern me directly, or as they say, I did not have a dog in that fight. I did not have the passion or the commitment about the road issue in their area. But times have changed. I am now on the City Council, and now it seems like I'm involved in everything, which is fine because I volunteered for this job. Since I'm new, I have been busy getting up to speed about many things involving the city and how everything works. Thank goodness, the city has tremendous department heads, all very professional and dedicated to making Cookeville a better place. On to the matter is, while we're speaking of the 2030 major street plan and the three roads that you feel should be removed from the plan I would like to thank Mr. Finch for sharing with me the information package from the Cookeville Area Residents Association. It was well organized and well written. The road they're primarily concerned with is what they call a Northern Connector Road, SR 451, Corridor J, Regional Economic Development Corridor, or whatever you want to refer to it as, is dead and gone. But as far as your group is concerned, the major street plan appears to be as if the city planners have only refilled a new bottle with the same old wine. If I'd been engaged in this matter as long as you have been, I probably at first would have appeared as such also. Now, the short time that I've been on the City Council and the Planning Commission, all the discussions about future street plans have been about identifying problems and looking for solutions to relieve traffic congestion in Cookeville. I agree with your group that a loop or ring around the city would not relieve traffic in the city and would draw business away from the downtown area of the city. Our discussions have been about moving traffic east to west and north to south, not around the city. The only road other than I-40 is Highway 70, Spring and Broad, that is continuous east to west, located in the city. There is a need for another road to do the same thing north of the inner city. We have Willow Avenue, Washington/Jefferson to move traffic north and south, but even these roads need improvement. Nearly every traffic count on our major city routes are at capacity or over now. I realize that the decision process for road projects must be approached in a different fashion in today's world. Citizens want to understand and be involved in the city's decision-making process. We as a city are facing mobility and quality of life issues that require long-range transportation solutions. Our community is growing, and with it comes more traffic and our ability to navigate through existing roads and streets. On an average day in the city of Cookeville, there are 75,000 people within the city limits. The current census shows us around 28,000 people, with an expected growth of 50% more in 20 years. Tennessee Tech has an enrollment of 11,500 students now, and I believe it will continue to increase in the years ahead. With industry recovering in the future and the business park being built in the near future, the prospects for more jobs in Cookeville looks bright. And oh yes, let's not forget the retail business, which attracts people to Cookeville by the thousands. So I think you can see that the city needs to address our transportation needs as quickly and as responsibly as we can afford to improve our roads. Not to do so would be irresponsible of the city leadership. The major road plan is a strategic wish list of future road projects, but the tactical reality of the present is that we must address the most needed projects that we can afford. The plans for a continuous east-west road to the north of Cookeville has been on the plans for a long time, just not as large and extensive as the TDOT plan of the past was. Since the 2030 major road plan has been worked on for 2 years, and in the short time that I've been involved, I see no reason not to approve the plan as written. Whether this northern route is ever developed at the current location on the major road plan is pure conjecture. The plan is not a law and is subject to further review in the future. I also want you to know that the 2030 plan is an effort to project in a logical and organized manner the future growth of Cookeville that benefits all the people in Cookeville.
Thank you, Councilman Woodford. Any other comments, questions from the council?
How many public meetings did you hold, Mr. Mills?
Over a dozen public meetings. The plan was available online for more than a year
Okay.
for public comments. Plus, we had many publicized work sessions, and we also, as I stated, held a random survey of Cookeville residents. We went above and beyond to try to get public input. Now, I can't sit here and tell you that all our public hearings were well attended, but they were offered and advertised.
Thank you, Mr. Mills. You guys been working on this for how long?
For over 2 years.
Over 2 years. And I've discussed at length with Mr. Finch and some of the Cookeville Area Residents Association members, and I see what they're saying as well. And I think they're also looking at the street plan as a restricted access road. Is that what Corridor J was originally proposed to be?
Yeah, that's the way it was presented to
Right.
the city, and Mr. Shipley can correct me if I'm wrong, but the city of Cookeville has never been a proponent of a restricted access highway, never.
Right.
And we argued even during the process of the 451 against that. That was never the city's desires, never reflected on any of the city's plans. That's what we were told would be built by the federal government.
Right. And that's, I mean, of course, obviously we're not saying that's what this is either, and we're not even saying that this will ever be built. It's just, it's a vision and it's a thought, and we have to plan for the future. And as congested as Cookeville can get sometimes, there needs to be some additional access points north of the city. And
Well, I think, as Mr. Woodford said, we've had many studies done. One of the primary deficiencies of transportation circulation in Cookeville is the lack of continuous east-west routes through the city. That's been shown for more than 2 decades.
Mm-hmm.
And when you project a population of 40,000 by the year 2030, it's not going to get any better. And we've got to try to identify those. And we've made some efforts towards that, especially to the south, with the recent construction of West Cemetery Road to extend an east-west corridor to the south. And those are things that we've planned for. Another thing about the actual major street plan, those are general locations. They're not, they can move thousands of feet. It's an indication that we need a northern east-west continuous route.
right, it's just pointing out a general area
Yes.
of relief, not that we're going to run a road right through there anytime soon or ever, but it's just the fact that we need relief.
And it could be, not to interrupt you, but it could be an upgrade of existing streets.
Right.
It doesn't have to be new streets, but it does reflect the need for that.
Thank you, Mr. Mills. Any other?
Well, in anything, a plan is just that, a plan. And if you don't have a plan, then you fall into the trap of perhaps developing in a manner that 20 years from now is not the way you wanted to develop. And, my business, if I don't plan, then things don't get done. But just because I plan doesn't mean that what I got written down is going to be set in stone and get done. In 10 years, we may have to look at this again, and it may need to change because we don't know. As you said, there were major assumptions made, and you have to assume things as you plan forward. And definitely, no roads are going to happen if we don't plan. And then the other part of that is you have to finance them. You've got to find the money for it. So, definitely the city of Cookeville's not sitting here ready to do all of this in any one fell swoop. It'd be nice if we could fix what we need to fix right now.
No, there's probably well over $100 million worth of proposed improvements on the major street plan.
I think the Planning Commission and you should be commended for the thorough job that you did in putting this master plan together.
We appreciate that. I know the Planning Commission does, and they did work very hard and very diligently on this plan.
It's very extensive, that's for sure. That's for sure. But the thing about roads is you really do have to plan way in advance, and get in front of TDOT or the feds or whoever it is that you need to get in front of, just to get it on their radar. And it still may or may not happen, and you always could say no, which the resident said no to on Corridor J. Yeah. So you can always do that. Just one quick story. I have a picture in my office. It's my grandfather and a contingent of folks from Overton and Putnam County. in the late 60s, and they went up to meet with Lyndon Johnson, talk about a major highway going north and south through Tennessee that would come in the Upper Cumberland area, Highway 111. And it's a picture of them off. It's pretty neat. But that was in the late 60s. That I drove on that road when I was in high school. It opened in the 90s, early 90s.
Yeah.
So just an idea of, I mean, how long things take. So you gotta get it on the, you gotta get it in front of people if it is ever going to happen. So for that reason, I would have to agree with the 2030 plan. But any other comments by the council? Anything from the audience?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
This, along with the packet that you already have, shows the same date, 2030, and even though this is identified as,
Sir, could I ask you to step to the podium and identify yourself? Thank you.
I'm Wayne Pegram, also of the Cookeville Area Residents Association. And that what I just gave you is the TDOT plan for these ring roads, and they're all identified by a letter because that's what we spent 2 years studying. And we just think that it's a little bit insulting for both the Putnam County and the city residents to have voiced their disapproval of some of these roads, and for 3 different professional studies to have shown them to have, as this TDOT study does, negative financial and safety factors associated with them. For these roads just to keep cropping up again and again, despite the fact that they have been disapproved of in the past, is just both perplexing and insulting, we think, to the voters. That it's not the will of the people. It just somebody keeps putting them back in there. And we're talking about those roads up there and only one of them is east-west, and it's so far north that East 10th is where the problem is. It's where the schools are. And the 2 times that they are really congested is in the morning when school assembles and in the afternoon when school lets out. And it's still mostly parents that choose to pick up their children instead of putting them on buses. It's a sort of a social problem too. But that road there is essentially up at the top. That's essentially what Corridor J was. And it's just back in there by another name.
Thank you, Mr. Pegram. Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, members of the council, my name is Brian Paddock. I attended a number of the working sessions of the Planning Commission and spoke several times with Mr. Mills. And I think the general plan represents a step forward. One of the things that I and folks that were trying to help was the plan's respect for kind of the natural environment, the need for additional open space, the need to recognize areas that were wetlands or bad slopes or poor soils that would not support appropriate development. And I really hope that the council will take seriously the implementation recommendations and schedule from the commission and begin to work on those ordinances with the city staff. You're under some external pressure in that regard because the state has adopted a new stormwater permit system, which goes into effect the first of the year, and that's going to require a review of a number of your ordinances that are related to those very kinds of things. So the state's going to want to see that review, and you're going to want to do it on a general plan. So I hope you will adopt the general plan and really act on the implementation. I would like to say, having followed this debate for a number of years, that the city is in a little bit of a quandary, because one of the rationalizations for demarcating that route in the roads plan, and as Mr. Mills says, that's certainly not a final alignment by any means, is to warn people who own land in that area or who may acquire it or may want to develop it. It's probably not the smartest idea you ever had to build a subdivision right in that approximate alignment, because somebody may come and need to build a road through it, or we may have to change the road a lot, which would be expensive and would disrupt other people. It's clearly considered to be somewhat of a commercial passage because it has these little local commercial dots in it. At the other hand, though, the council, by adopting this general road plan, is saying two things that are inconsistent, because it's saying we think someday there may need to be this alignment. On the other hand, the city has, in fact, relinquished all zoning control to the area within the urban growth boundary, but outside the city limits. We gave that back to the county. We gave it back because people who live in that area would have to be put on the planning commission if we were to extend our zoning authority as the city's allowed to, and under previous agreement with the county, we could go and zone that area. We could keep control of that area. But the city walked away from that because it didn't want folks who lived out there to have representation on the planning commission. And it seems to me a little bit unfair to say to these folks, we're going to essentially predict a future in which you may have a major road through your area, but by the way, you're not going to get to sit on our planning commission, and you're not going, and you live outside our city limits. You can't vote for the council. You can't sit on our planning commission. So I think you should remember that as the overall situation here. The other thing you should recognize is that going back to the prior plan, which was done under a mandate of state law, to look at future growth and create an urban growth boundary that says this is about as far as we ever think we're going to go. And within that, we will annex. And outside of that, it's going to be left to the county or to other jurisdictions. And that was in part to prevent big fights over annexation that revolved around possible sales tax revenue if somebody wanted to annex a little piece out here and put a big box store in, and the argument was going to be between the county or an adjacent jurisdiction in the city. And the law, to that extent, has ameliorated that situation. But look at the city you have. You have a city that is extremely low density. When the University of Tennessee came in and said, your population is going to go from this to this, the Planning Commission at that time, and this Planning Commission has repeated it, has essentially said, let's have a city that takes twice as much footprint as it really takes for the developed areas of the city. Where the city's really developed, we have a relatively high density city. For the area here that we're going to grow in the future, it's going to be very low density. As Mr. Mills pointed out, a lot of it is the lowest possible residential density. Well, the costs of providing public services and infrastructure to extremely low density areas is enormous. And you usually cannot tax people that live in those low density areas enough per house to pay for the costs of the infrastructure you have to put in. That bill is starting to arrive because the proposals you've made in annexation say we're going to provide sewers and water and so forth by this time, particularly sewers. And those deadlines are going to start arriving, and we're going to find that the deferred costs of providing that infrastructure in these annexed areas is going to be significant. And I don't think that the city has actually compiled a good list of what it's going to have to spend in the next 20 years if it's really going to annex out to this area, leave low densities, and provide all of the city services and infrastructure for it. So I think the city ought to think about the fact that it may do better with a higher density and more compact city that can support things like public transit and public services in a concentrated fashion, and not try to spread out over what is left of open space within our urban growth boundary. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Paddock.
Let me address a couple of those things.
Yes, sir. Mr. Mills.
Number one, we've never had extraterritorial zoning to relinquish. We've never enforced zoning outside of the city of Cookeville, so we never had that to relinquish. What we had was a planning region, which we abandoned to the county. But we've never enforced zoning outside the city of Cookeville. Regarding the low density, I would ask Mr. Paddock to go back and actually look at the 99 plan. There's much less low density areas on here. We had even less, but as a result of one of our public hearings, the residents in one section of the city were adamant that their area be shown as the low density, ultra low density areas. And I don't know if Mr. Pack attended that meeting. Also, I would encourage him to read the plan. At some of these areas that we've identified as ultra low density are areas where we want to have open space. These areas he mentioned about protecting, ones that have environmental concerns. That's the reason why we've identified them as low density. We don't want those areas developed in higher density development.
Thank you, Mr. Mills.
I would just, if I may, I would agree with Mr. Mills, and I really misspoke. I said relinquishing zoning. It was subdivision control, approval of subdivision, so it was
That's
within
correct.
the city's power, and it was relinquished. I apologize for the error.
Thank you. Anyone else from the audience? All right, thank you. Any more comments from the council? All right. Seeing none, call for the vote.
Yes. 4 yes votes, motion carries.
Thank you. All right. On to item number 10. Consider declaring as surplus property the city property located off Fireside Drive, parcel 3.01, tax map 410, Group C. Sponsor James Mills.
Mr. Mayor and council members, this request was submitted by Bobby Phillips and his brother Steve Phillips. The property that's proposed for declaration as surplus is depicted upon the screen. Here's an aerial view of the property. Parcel 3.01 was divided from Lot 24 of the Bilberry Park subdivision and purchased by the city in 1972. It consists of just under 4,000 square feet. The Water Quality Control Department indicates that the property was acquired for the purpose of constructing a sewer pump station. It was mentioned at the Planning Commission that the pump station had not been built, but it actually was built but was removed. And Mr. Kelly, the director of that department, indicates that the property is no longer needed for a sewer pump station. There are sewer lines located on the property for which easements would need to be retained if the property is declared as surplus and sold. The Phillips state that they wish to purchase the property at 899 Fireside Drive, which is identified as parcel 3, and it's the parcel with the house located immediately adjacent to the city-owned property. As you can see from the map, the driveway that serves the residential structure at 899 Fireside Drive is located on the city-owned property, parcel 3.01. The home at 899 Fireside Drive was constructed sometime around 2000, but I can't give you a reason how it was approved with the driveway constructed on the city's property. We can't find any record of how that was approved, but it was, and it has happened. Also, the house may actually violate setbacks and may actually encroach slightly on this property. The request has been reviewed by the applicable city departments and approved with the aforementioned retention of utility easements. The value of parcel 3 has been established by the city manager at $2.20 per square foot, or $8,535.80. The planning department recommended to the planning commission that parcel 3.01 be made available for purchase only by the owners of parcel 3, which are the Phillips, and that the combination of parcel 3.01 with parcel 3 be a condition for conveyance. And this is due to parcel 3.01 being too small for building development as a separate parcel, the aforementioned encroachment of the use on parcel 3, and that parcel 3.01 was originally a part of parcel 3. The Planning Commission recommending for approval of the surplus declaration with sale to the property owners of parcel 3 at a price of $220 per square foot, subject to the retention of the utility easements and to the combination of the parcels. And the Planning Department concurs with this recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Mills. Do I have a motion for approval in a second?
I move for approval.
Second.
All right. Any questions or discussion from the council? Any from the audience? Seeing none, call for the vote.
4 yes votes, motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mills. On to item number 11. Consider authorizing Waller Lansden, Dorch, and Davis as bond counsel for the $7.2 million general obligation industrial and business park bonds, Series 2010. Sponsor is Mike Davidson.
Mayor and council members, another step in this process for the city to issue bonds is to engage legal counsel to help us through this process. And actually, we've been working with Waller, Lansden, Dorch, and Davis for the last month and getting us to this point. We have worked with them in the past. Back in July, the gas department issued some refunding bonds, and we use this same firm to help us through that process. And I'd recommend using them for this current issue of $7.2 million for the business park.
Thank you, Mr. Davidson. Do I have a motion and a second for approval?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion from the council? Any from the audience? Seeing none, call for the vote.
4 yes votes, motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Davidson.
Thank you.
Item 12, consider awarding bid for the construction of the Highlands Business Park Road. Sponsor is Mr. Greg Brown.
Mayor and council, we recently advertised and received bids for the Industrial Business Park Road. This is the road that starts at Bennett Road, goes through the business park, and intersects with Lee Seminary Road just west of Holiday Road. We had a base bid with 2 alternates. The only difference between the 3 bids was how the subgrade is treated. One of them treats the subgrade with lime. The other one has a geogrid, and the other one has both. And it's just a way to find what would be the best price to get the same product. I would recommend using alternate A from Highways Incorporated of $12,944,238.52. I recommend that bid to be approved.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Do I have a motion for approval and a second?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion from the council? Questions?
No.
Any from the audience? Seeing none, call for the vote.
4 yes votes, motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. All right, item 13. Consider awarding bid for 1 service truck with the electric department. Sponsor Tony Peak. Mr. Peak.
Mayor and council, we solicited and opened bids for a crew chief truck. It's a truck that goes off-road, hauls materials and those kind of things. It's replacing a truck that's in excess of 10 years old, and I'd recommend Cookeville Ford as a low bidder meeting specifications. This is a budgeted item, by the way.
Thank you, Mr. Peak. Do I have a motion for approval in a second?
So move.
And a
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion from the council? Any from the audience? Seeing none, call for the vote.
4 yes votes,
Thank
motion
you.
carries.
Thank you, Mr. Peak. All right, this is a portion of the meeting where we like to ask the audience members if they have anything they would like to discuss. We just ask them to come up to the podium, recognize who they are, and keep it to 3 minutes if we can.
Mr. Mayor, Council, individuals, my name is Alan Stingley. I'm the chairperson for the Westside Business Association. I'm here tonight to invite council, city manager, and all the Cookeville public to a tree lighting, Christmas tree lighting that the Westside Business Association is sponsoring in conjunction with the Cookeville Performing Arts Center. It'll be Saturday evening at 5 o'clock. We have the Mr. Mayor is going to be speaking, I believe, and Councilwoman Anderson has told me she would say a few things. So we'd like to invite all the members of the council, the city manager, to attend that festive evening with us, West Side.
Thank you, Mr. Stingley. Look forward to being there. Anyone else? All right, any discussion from the council?
None.
Shop in Cookeville.
Shop in Cookeville. Also want to say that the Blue Cross Blue Shield High School Football State Championships are in town. As a matter of fact, they're playing right now. And we'd like to welcome everybody to town for that. That's a big boost to the Cookeville economy, and I think everyone enjoys it. Tell everyone to go out and watch some football tonight, tomorrow night, and Saturday.
Monday.
And also to let you know that the Christmas parade was, of course, postponed last Monday and moved to this coming Monday at what time?
6, I believe, isn't it?
6 o'clock? 7 o'clock. 7 o'clock. Thanks, Chad. And that'll be 7 o'clock Monday night. Hope everybody can attend that as well. Any other announcements from anyone? All right. Seeing none, meeting is adjourned.